Hey, just wanted to make a quick video about how to smooth your path in SYNTHEYES. So here you can see that my camera path is a little bit jittery, causing these diamonds in the foreground to shake around uncontrollably. Now this is bad because if you had any snow, particles, or anything floating in the foreground, you're going to see them pop around and do a little dance. So how do we correct this? So before we go and apply smooth, let's take a quick look at what could be possibly causing the jitter in my shot. I don't actually have all that many trackers in my scene. And when you have very few trackers in your scene, there's a good chance that the pop or jitter in any one of those trackers is going to have a large influence on your shot. If you had 100 trackers on your screen at any moment, and only one of those points had a little pop, it's going to be drowned out by the influence of every other tracker, and it's not going to be a problem. So because I'm dealing with so few trackers, I have to be much more careful about what I'm tracking for a couple of reasons. Every tracker that I have here has the potential to be dealing and fighting against motion blur or grain caused by your camera. And here you can see that I'm affected by both if we take a look at this bench. I have a little bit of grain going on within the, well, wood grains, and a little bit of motion blur is causing my point to have a little bit of motions that might not be desirable. So because of those little issues in the trackers, if I hit F4 and come look at the camera path, you could see that all those little micro issues are being pushed into the path of the camera. Just to put it out there, an easy way for me to resolve this a little bit is I can add a lot more trackers, because the more trackers you have, the more that it's going to average out all of that noise that's happening within your points. But instead, we're going to use path filtering and go through that and a little bit of axis locks, but we're not going to go in depth on axis locks. That's for another video. So let's head on over to the solver tab and check out filtering control right here above axis locks. So I'm going to give that a click, and over here you can see we have not too many buttons and options, but might look like a bit much to somebody who's just starting out. So taking a look at this window, like it says, path and field of view filtering cause sliding. You have been warned. Use this only when necessary and only with great care. So this is important because when you smooth this path, I just want to show you real quick, and it's going to show us our first couple of boxes here. If we smooth this path, technically, you are going to cause sliding in your 3D points apart from your trackers. So the goal with solving is you want your 3D point to match your tracker extremely well. But if you smooth it or alter this path, so if I move this camera up or down, you could see that we are moving around these points. So when I hit this with a smooth, I'm going to go ahead and check off X, Y, and Z. That is our translation path right here. So once I hit this, we should notice our 3D points will have a little bit of movement and our path will be super clean. So now, notice that when I undo and redo, our points have been altered. This is slide introduced from just smoothing the path. So the error that was introduced with applying the smooth to your camera is very expected, and we will correct for it later. But first, I want to go through a couple of the extra buttons in this window. So as you just saw, X, Y, and Z applies to your camera path. So this would be your translation. Here we have pan, tilt, and roll, which deals with the rotations of your camera. Here we have distance. Distance is used for object solves that have some Z-depth jitter. And FOV, or field of view, deals with when you're working with zoom lenses that you have to correct for. I just hit undo, so we have our jittery camera path back the way it was. So let's take a moment to talk about frequency and strength. Sometimes you want to get rid of sharp movements in your shot, but you want to keep the overall motion. So that's where you would mess with the frequency. And strength is basically just a multiplier. So I shot this handheld. The default settings here for frequency and SYNTHEYES are mainly geared towards when your shot's on like cranes or tracks or, anything that might have a smooth movement. So if I hit apply right now, this is kind of an over smooth for what I'm doing. I'm holding this handheld, so I should have a little bit more of an imperfect movement going on here with the path. So I'm going to undo this. And if I wanted to preserve my stuff a little bit more, I got to adjust frequency. So if I hit smooth, I want you to look right around here. So we have an overall motion and then we have a spike. If I smooth right now, this chunk of path here that we kind of want to be the same is going to move. So if I hit apply, see it moved a little bit here. If I undo, and if I come over and turn frequency up to something like 15, which by the way, sometimes things animate in SYNTHEYES, it's usually best for you to apply this stuff on the first frame. So I'm going to hit 15 over here. 15 is generally what I use for handheld motions. So if I hit apply now, you could see that motion, that part of the path right here has stayed kind of the same, but these sharp spikes over here have been cleaned out. So adjusting frequency allowed us to kind of keep the same motion that the camera was probably moving like on set. And if I undo, and like I said, strength here is kind of like a multiplier. So if I change this down to 0.5 and then hit apply, you'll notice that our path is only going to get half of that smooth. So I'm going to come back to 15 and hit apply. And that's as much smooth as I want. And if we have to, I'll hit another smooth later. So now that I've applied a smooth that I'm currently happy with, always hit reset filter once you're done. Because if you leave any of this stuff on, every time you hit solve, it's going to apply another layer of smooth that you did not intend to have. We want to smooth this, and now we want to lock this path and not affect it anymore. So we're going to clear this so this doesn't apply when you hit go. So now that I've reset it, you can close it, and that's it for now. So I'm about to go and solve this. Ignore what I'm about to do. I'm going to select all my trackers, and I'm going to set seed because earlier I set seed and I had to turn on calc distortion and resolve. And I did some rough seed points just so I can have my solve remain in the same place. So I just didn't feel like re-recording all of this. So ignore what I'm about to do. You shouldn't have to do this. I'm going to hit Control A and I'm going to set seed for my trackers so that all of their points go and lock to where they're currently solved at. So yeah, don't worry about that. You didn't even see me do this. So now let's resolve the rotations of our camera. I'm going to head over to the Solver tab, and I'm going to hit F2 so I get a full screen view, and I'm going to show meshes. I have a hotkey for this, so if you don't, right-click, come to View, and you have Show Meshes somewhere here. So like I demonstrated before, when you smooth your shot, technically you shift your 3D points apart from your trackers. So technically, our rotations are wrong, and we need to resolve for those, even though it's subtle and nobody would ever notice. But I promise you, in a lot of cases, it is noticeable when all the renders and everything are applied. So please always do this. So this is not something I'm going to explain in depth. I'm going to leave axis locks for another video. So I'm just going to quickly touch on this here and just gloss through it. So first off, you should be in refine mode. When you have a result that you're kind of happy with, you should switch to refine and work off of that result that you have. So we're in refine. We're going to turn on constrain because we're going to start using locks, and I have some constraints in my scene with these trackers, and we want SYNTHEYES to obey those. So I'm going to come over to axis locks, and here we have a lot of buttons, and again, I'll go through all this later. Basically, you can lock your position, rotation, your object distance, and your field of view. You have weight strength for how strong you want it to stick to those smooths, and then you have the actual curve data that's going to be used for the locks. So what we should be seeing is the smooth path should be animated in here, but it is not because we have to load this camera's path in. And to do that, I can hit get. I just want to show you real quick. This says seed path values. If I hit F7 on my keyboard, I'm going to get graph editor. And if I come and take a look at cameras and objects, come to camera, and I'll just turn off velocity. I'm going to turn on solve path and seed path. Actually, let's look at solve path first. Solved path, if I click on X, Y, and Z and double click the hands, let's hit this little colored button just to hide that harsh brightness. Here you can see the motion of our camera path. So this is smoothed. If I come over to seed path, notice that there's nothing here. Now if I come over to this and I hit get, so what it just did was it went and got the smooth path from the camera, the one that we altered, and loaded it into seed path. So with this, we now have some information loaded into seed path values that the lock is going to listen to. So I'm just going to go and turn on position on the first frame, do the stuff on the first frame because this button animates. So now we have everything set up. We have our smooth path loaded into seed path values. We have our position locked, constraint is on, and we are set to refine. With all that being said, let's go ahead and hit solve. So I'm going to hit Shift G, and notice that our error went from 0.6 to 0.7. That's not too bad. That's normal, and technically because we're taking away SYNTHEYES' freedom to do what it wants to do. So the error will always go up when you start working with axis locks. So if I undo and redo, you can see that the rotations have changed. But the path has remained the same. I am undoing and redoing right now. So one more thing I had to say real quick about filtering control is there's a couple other things to the right side here. You can see to solve path or to seed path. And I'm saying this at the end because We went over earlier that you have seed path and solve path here. So we took the solve path that we smoothed and we loaded it into seed path, and notice that you have the option to now smooth your seed or your solve. So you can directly alter or smooth your seed path and then hit solve again if you wanted to do it that fast. Or you can just mess with your solve path and then hit get and load that stuff back in here and it'd be the same thing. I do want to point out that notice with my solve path and actually my seed path, so we're going to do this with the seed path, there is a little issue at the end. The path filter stuff, the filtering stuff in SYNTHEYES has a little problem with the beginning and end frames of the shot because there isn't any other data over here to use. So you might end up with a little kink like this. In that case, you could just come down and grab this little key values tool, and you could select your point and adjust it if you need to, or you can clear it, do whatever you feel you must. There we go. Check my first frame, and it's not too bad. So because I've adjusted that, I can just immediately hit go. And it's hard to notice, but it corrected the last frame for us now. The rotation changed slightly. And down here, you can see we have whole shot and playback range. So you can choose to trim down your playback slider, which is very hard to see on my monitor here, and then only smooth that playback range if you feel that's all you need. So that is all there is to doing a very basic smooth on a path. Of course, you can go along and do some wild things with filtering and access locks, but I'm not going to go into that with this. So hope you enjoyed and have fun smoothing your paths. I don't know, I wanted to say something rude there. I just couldn't muster the willpower to do so. I don't know. You're just such a nice person. All right. Have a great day.